Hi, and welcome to Alert and Oriented, the Whitman Partners Professional Development Series, where we interview bright people in a comfortable setting to advance learning. Today's guest is Jeff Yoakum, founder and principal of Marquee Search, a boutique search and recruitment firm focused on game-changing talent for the business of sports. Jeff Yoakum is a friend of mine for 20 years since we both started in the recruiting business. In the last 10 years, we've had regular lunches called to assembly by either Jeff Markham, or myself, in which we talk about some professional challenge. And I would always take a page of notes and hustle back to my office, and I might even put it on a PowerPoint and share it with my peers, and by proxy they would reap the reward of that visit, and they would be very warm about receiving that insights. And so this Alert and Oriented is sort of to take away the middleman and to bring the thought leader to the audience, and so that's why we're here. So without further ado, welcome to Jeff Yoakum.
Thank you, Josiah. So first, I'd like to say thanks for having me, and second, congratulations on putting together a platform like this, not only for your company, but also for the industry. So for that, full credit. But I'm a little worried. Who's supposed to be alert and who's supposed to be oriented? Is this like the Abbott and Costello thing? That am I alert or are you alert?
Exactly.
Am I oriented?
Exactly. It's an anesthesia term, and it means that you're ready to, I think, come out of anesthesia, if I'm not mistaken.
Hopefully, I won't experience that too soon. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay. So let's begin here. For those that don't know Jeff and Marquee as well, let's start with. So what we do know, Jeff, is, for example, the Jerry Maguire archetype, where you're dealing with professional sports teams as the client, and you're dealing with talent, and you're the broker, brokering these deals. That's on this side of the spectrum. And then on this side of the spectrum, we have just the sort of workaday corporate recruiter with sort of anonymous client and an anonymous candidate. Where is Marquee on that spectrum? Talk to us a little bit about who your clients are and who your candidates are.
While Marquee may not be a household name kind of in Portland, we're headquartered in Portland for only good reasons are that's just where we live and we like it here. We'd probably be better off in New York or Chicago or LA just based on our clientele and the competition in our industry. We have, while we're not this well-known brand, our clients generally are. So we're humbled and honored to have clients like the Green Bay Packers and the Raiders, the Sounders and the Timbers, the Mavericks, a host of other sports teams we just did a search for the Lions in Detroit. So our clients are generally well-known sports properties, to some degree some sports marketing agencies that serve the industry, that'll serve either the consumer or serve the brands that are trying to have sponsorships within and utilize sports and entertainment as a vehicle for their companies. Watch the Super Bowl and you see all these advertising. So the Jerry Maguire thing, I always cringe a little bit just because I grew up when the movie was there, and it's a little bit maybe like CSI. I remember someone coming to me once. They talked about getting a degree in some forensics because of CSI. And that was the same effect that Jerry Maguire had. There are people that wanted to get into sports marketing because they saw Jerry Maguire and they thought it was real, and it's not. And that's not like big news to a lot of people, but to young, impressionable people, it's like this is the industry. That's not the sports industry. Certainly on the agent side, there's some of that going on. We sit between the long version of the answer is we sit in between that. We work directly with really the front offices of these professional sports teams mostly, to fill business operations kinds of positions. So those are heavy revenue driving positions, could be operational jobs, really anything at a management level kind of role, director on up, is what we endeavor to fill. On an occasion, we get tapped to do a controller or a CFO, which is what my roots are and what Tyler Nelson, who's here in the room as well, that's our roots are in that background. So we'll do that sometimes. But those positions don't turn over all that much in our industry. So it's generally revenue driving, marketing roles. How are they out there advertising and building revenue for the teams so they can go sign your favorite player, so they can go make sure that they're competitive in a super competitive landscape.
Sure. Okay. And so not much with regard to the head coach of a sports team, but does that exist, or is that more of an agent-driven deal?
It does exist. It does exist usually with the larger sports practices in our industry. So there are companies that are doing head coaching searches, athletic director searches for professional sports teams, for colleges obviously as well. So that exists. There are firms that specialize in nothing but that, and there are firms that try to cross over into all areas. So, you know, it is out there, and that's not something that to this point that we've been really involved in.
Got it. Okay, and so you mentioned Tyler. And so you have a partner in Tyler. It's the two of you. That strikes me as you need to gauge a day of recruiting and a day of business development. And the two, where does Tyler start and you leave off? And tell me about a little bit of day in the life.
We're partners really in the business in terms of I'm more actualized as it relates to business development, so I'm out doing more of the hunting. Okay. He's now been with me for a couple of years, so he's doing more and more of that, and I think that's something that he's really good at. And now that he's found kind of his own voice, you know, listening to, you know, what it's like listening to hundreds of phone calls from someone else, right. You start to kind of do this pastiche of his style, and so he has his own really good style. At the end of the day, we're both full cycle recruiters. You know, we both put on our hard hat every day and our lunchbox, and we go to work and focus on getting new business, and focusing enough on getting new business even when we're super busy with the right. searches we have, which is a challenge, and then focused on the fulfillment of the searches that we have. So when we're hired, we're generally retained in some sort of way, engaged or retained, so our clients have skin in the game. Sure. So when they do that, we know that they're deliverables. They expect deliverables from us. We have a research function. We have a researcher that we utilize as well, and other administrative kind of support. Right. But as it relates to client exposure, candidate exposure, it's the two of us, right. With me maybe doing more of the lion's share of the business development. Okay, and
so talk about business development. So, you know, advertisements come over the Oregonian, and that might be a source of the beginning, the spark of a new lead that you chase down, but not for you, I don't think. This is not the type of role that you see advertised on Indeed or the Oregonian or even the Wall Street Journal. Tell me a little bit about how you find your business.
Through referrals, through word of mouth, through being on the phone and talking to candidates about where they've been. A lot of times, though, we'll get a phone call and it'll be a team that says we've got a search coming up. I think we want to call a couple of searches and you were recommended to us. We may not know them. Right. A lot of it, at least 2/3 of our business is from past clients. So I tell our prospective clients, that's a part of the pitch, is that once you use us, you'll use us again. I'm confident in that based on how we execute. You know, right. I'll give them the empirical evidence of based on the performance that we take any search very, very seriously. Some of the bigger competitors, they could have dozens of searches, and they're going to hand off some of those searches to the junior varsity, to really entry-level kinds of people, right. Once they go out and they do the business development. I don't do that. You know, Tyler doesn't do that. We're both involved from square one on a search, kind of cradle to grave. We walk through the entire process, which means you have an adult, you have a professional that works on the search. So for us, it's part of our pitch, you know, is essentially that we're working together, but we're never too big for the searches that we're working on.
And working together. So do you build a long list of potential candidates, and do you carve them up? Tyler, you're on these candidates, I'm on these candidates, or does Tyler handle the Raiders search and you handle, it sounds like you do a little bit of both.
We have a little bit of a project management kind of a mentality where I'll know he's running point on something. We both have access to, you know, pipelines where we're going to go in and make changes and update kind of real-time records for our clients that we're sharing with them. Right. But at the end of the day, it's rare that only one of us is working on one of the, you know, a search. Right. We've got something now that's pretty esoteric that I've kept away from him for strategic purposes, and not to. I feel I'm wearing this, you know, kind of right. Badge of thorns or right. whatever. So I'm having to run that search. But most of the time, we're very connected. We're talking to each other. He's in the office right next to me. You know, we're having weekly meetings, or daily meetings, really, when we're talking about where are we at on the sourcing for this job. Right. You know, where we're talking about what the researchers brought in for us. So I'd say because we're small, we can be pretty nimble and do that. If we scale, I think that I'll have to be much more structured and disciplined, I think, than I am now.
Okay, well, I want to hear about scaling in a moment, but you mentioned the tough search. Can you give an example of a search that was particularly tough, that maybe went sort of off the rails a little bit, and what you did to get it back on?
We don't have any of those.
Okay.
Seriously, I knew he was going to ask this question, and I grappled with this for a little while because I don't think, how much do we really want to go back and play the, rewind the tape on something that's painful? But I also thought, it's instructive. People like to know that, we're all human. And I also felt good because we recovered it. So we were doing a search for a president of a minor league baseball team. It was a really top-notch organization we'd never worked with before. The CEO is a former CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and he owns the team. And he was intricately involved in the search. Mm-hmm. And so we felt a lot of pressure, like this is, this guy is connected to minor league baseball, and he can give us additional business. So the number one candidate was a virtuoso. He was emotionally intelligent. He killed every interview that he did. Mm-hmm. Flew in. We're talking to him all along the way. I want this job. I want this job. Talk to me about the family. How are they feeling? They're in Arizona. This search was in the north. The weather's colder. It was colder months. How are they feeling? Good. Paying lip service to it. We knew the second flight in would involve taking his significant other. That trip came around. She didn't go. He said, "That's okay. She's still in. We're still going to take this job. We're good." He goes up and ends up, we verbalize the offer. I verbalize the offer to him, and he starts to give me all the smoke screens and asking for way more than ever was discussed. And I'm like, this is a red herring. I know what's going on. She's not going to go. Right. And so had a pretty tough conversation with him, and got to a point where we said, you're out. We're not going to do this. And by the way, he's emailed me since then to apologize and to say I should have taken that job. He took a different job, and is pining for that job to be his. Right. He was by far and away the first place candidate. So, always have a second place candidate. We did have a 2 and a 3. We spent extra time really vetting the second and third place candidate, really doing deep dives with references and other people that knew them, because we knew what their holes were, and we wanted to show these are still the best candidates. We've done an exhaustive industry-wide search. These are the best candidates. Thankfully, the client trusted us. They felt good about our process, and they ended up hiring the second place candidate, and he's doing great. I just saw these guys at the baseball winter meeting in December, and they were really happy. But it was gut check time. They're committed to the search, so they could do a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, if you've been doing the work, and they never were mad. They said, "We get it. He hit the ball on all of us." Right. He went in and he told us these things, and he was a phenomenal liar. And he would have been good at the job, but a little bit of a sociopath. So,
yeah. Right.
So it was painful, but you have painful searches. It's always about the recovery. It's always about, do you make the phone call to a candidate or a client, or instead of an email? Did you jump on it early? For me, it's all about timing, and then how do you recover? And if someone's going to get mad, let's deal with it now. It's like eat the frog, right? Let's do it now, then kick it down the road where it's going to get nothing but worse.
And so you'd mentioned once to me that you have your process, 23-step process, if I remember right. Would he have been caught did he get caught in one of the 23 steps? Tell me about that.
I mean, the last steps of the process is talking about counteroffer, but which we talk about all the way through, because most of the people we're working with are employed, so we're always talking about counteroffer. Sure. What have you been? I don't think that the process was flawed in that case. I think that the BS meters. We deal with humans at the end of the day, right. And no one's perfect. We do our best to not make offers that will not be accepted. We really didn't, because we verbalized it. It was never a written offer, right. So it really wasn't ever made. The test balloon was out there, but some of those steps are at the end of the process, and ensuring. On the upfront side, Tyler and I have done some kind of talk tracks about the no surprises conversation, that when you're doing an intake on a serious candidate, you talk about no surprises, right. How you won't surprise them, and you expect them not to surprise you. Okay. And what can those surprises be? Usually they're bad surprises. There's usually not in our job, is there ever a good surprise? Very, very rarely. And so usually the surprise is, guess what? We're pregnant, the spouse is now against the move, I'm taking a counteroffer, all these things that we talk about up front to try and bulletproof that and say, if you have any of these things in mind now, let's talk about them. Let's talk about them. But I do this for a living, and this is my reputation and my living on the line. And if the only way we're going to get sideways is if you're not honest with us. Mm-hmm. And if this is the time to talk about those things. So if you want to leverage for a counteroffer. I'll give you some advice. Let's just talk about it.
Right.
Don't use this job for that.
Right.
Every once in a while, someone will, and we'll never forget.
Sure, sure. You coined a phrase, or maybe you borrowed it, called the nonfiction storyteller. What does that mean?
I think I borrow everything, or I co-opt it and I make it mine. I don't know where I first heard it, but I think that because of one of the 23 steps, one of the most important is the intake process, the discovery process. How do you start off a search? And that's usually an hour long at least, typically by phone, maybe video, possibly in person, but usually by phone. And so how are we building the search brief? And we're both on the phone call, so we're trying to bring every member of their executive staff that's involved, let's have the conversation. Sometimes it needs to be one-on-one just to share information, and other times it's let's have the whole group together. Sure. But we're building a search brief. And so when we call a candidate, and we're not going to just send out 1,000 emails, we're going to call a candidate that we think is a good fit. What is the story we're telling? We have relationships in this industry because we're specialized. If we're telling them a fictional story about this is a job that is perfect, there's no such thing. We know there's no such thing as a perfect job. Okay. So we got to make sure that they know this isn't a perfect job. We think it's a great job for these reasons. Here's where the hair is. Here's where the concerns are. Let's talk about those things. Because Tyler got a call the other day from someone who said they took a job through another firm and they realized immediately they got sold a bill of goods. Okay. They weren't really happy about it. Right. They called us. They're trying to get out. So for us, we tell our clients we're a great nonfiction storyteller because we do such a thorough intake that we're going to go out there and pitch your job to the best candidates who will usually say no. And we'll find out why are you saying no, and we'll find out if this is a reason to reconsider that. Or we have that happen all the time. We get a lot of no's that sometimes we turn around. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're for the right reasons. I won't move to Cleveland. I don't. Whatever. Whatever it is. But if it's something they have a bad read on an organization, because we've done such an intake on the culture and what's happening, the status quo. Are they aspirational? Are they trying to just be status quo? We find out, I think, a lot about the search, and therefore can communicate it to candidates in a way that, frankly, our clients typically can't because they don't do this for a living. Mm-hmm. If it's a head of partnership sales that sells for a living, they're probably pretty good at it, but they can't wear our hat. They can't be Marquee Search as a search firm that's been hired. So there's some PR, there's some communications here, but we better be really good communicators. And I think that when we get someone on the phone, that we're really good.
Describe a search brief. I think we have one here that may be the equivalent. It's 5 pages. It's got pictures, the job description, bullet points from our travel to visit the client, that kind of thing. Is that the same?
To some degree. The search brief for me is a little bit more about what is it that we're saying to the candidate. So if we're talking about what the opportunity is, if we have 30 minutes to pitch the job, which we might sometimes if it's a really good job, we're going to talk them through that entire pitch. And so the search brief is really our intake form, which we've got sections on culture, we've got sections on what is the work, mm-hmm. the job, the people in the organization, why what's the reason for the opening, where's the pain, all the things that you really want to know as a search consultant. Right. So the brief is our ability to really play the consultant role, and then we do try to pull in decks from our clients and additional information that we're going to send out. We usually send that out either if they're really seriously think about getting interested. We'll have some information that's not proprietary, and others that's proprietary that we'll give out towards the end of a search where it can be project related and they need to review some information from.
Are there NDAs in your industry?
On occasion. Typically if it's a confidential search. Right. So NDAs if there's a confidential search and we can't tell them who it is until we have them sign that. Right. And on occasion if they're going to share some level of information that they're uncomfortable with. Right. But I'd say 10% of the time they're signing an NDA, maybe.
Interesting. Okay. Back to scalable. Marquee growing. Yes. If you grow and add more people, what do you think you would want to either bring in-house or what would be the Marquee in years in the future?
So Marquee started 7 years ago. I've been in this industry for 18. I was at a company called GameFace for 11 years doing the same work with a bigger team, but we had like a 3-legged stool where there was a training component, there was a search component, and there was like an academy where we would train entry-level people that saw Jerry Maguire and wanted to work in sports. So there was 3 legs to the stool, and I did have a team there that was usually dispersed around the country. But as I look at it in creating Marquee, it took me a while to find Tyler. It took me a year to find him. Once I did, I was like, that's the guy I really want to hire. Okay. So what does scaling look like? One, diversity, I think would be important. Okay. A couple of white guys in sports is kind of the norm, which in our industry, not great. the industry is doing a better job of diversifying in the type of candidates they're hiring, because they want new thoughts, they want new leaders, they want new voices, and their market is changing too. It's like, who are you selling to? So I would say diversity is going to be important. We really could use support as it relates to marketing communications. I kind of power the social media engine. We do a smaller version of pushing out social information about our videos, about here, do a primer on a job, and we push that out, and we've had really good results and very good feedback from candidates and clients. They like that because it separates from a lot of the noise out in the market. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think it'd be great to have people that can really skilled at doing that. Mm-hmm. You could probably laugh when you watch Tyler and I kind of get together and put the microphone on, and we'll do a very organic 2-minute pitch for that. It's not as structured. But I think the marketing communications piece, pushing social, driving awareness about who we are and what we do, having people to go to conferences. There's more and more events out there these days. Right. I think our travel requirements are probably being ramped up a bit, although temporarily on hold, right. Hopefully only temporary. But I think there's some travel requirements of just being out in front of people more and more at events. I think that bringing research in-house as well, a sourcer that we had in-house, not out of house. Mm-hmm. Administrative functions, the scheduling, just all these things that you kind of take for granted until you're doing them yourselves. Right. So I've outsourced a lot of it, but I think that the next hire would be bringing some of that back in-house and continuing to build esprit de corps. I've never been a remote person. I had to do it myself for a little while at GameFace, and I didn't like it. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of having the esprit de corps and the office culture and doing things together and hearing other voices and what they're doing and what's going on. And you're not 100% every day. I mean, you come in and you go, I got my A game every day. No, but you can play off your coworker who might, and that just brings it up to another level versus being someone that's remote who I hire in Miami or something like that I don't know what they're doing unless I'm slacking them, and giving them some instant message stuff.
So sure. Now I perceive that if you let it be known that you have a head of partnerships with the Portland Trailblazers, that resumes come in over the transom. Is that the case? And would you use the term candidate driven or client driven, like so many other recruiting firms describe their market?
Resumes do. If you advertise a strong job, you do get a lot of resumes. Usually they're the wrong resumes. I don't think that's a surprise for you, but we had a big job with the Packers a while ago, and I've never seen so many resumes coming from people that had never worked in sports. It's like, here are the actual requirements, and everybody, I'm the biggest Packer fan. I would move to Green Bay in a second. Great, you have none of the experience. I mean, like literally none of the experience. And so we just drafted an automatic response to a lot of those people. It's like, unless they were referred. We like to take calls from referrals because we're representing the Packers or the brands that we're working with. So there is a heavy inflow of candidates coming in all the time that want to work in the industry. They're the ones that are in the industry that are applying to a job. Fair or not, we probably have a little bit of a concern about why are they looking. What are they, why aren't they happy in the job that they're in? Unless there's good reasons too, but we'll always have, some level of process that we'll have to put them through. We expect that we have to proactively recruit the best candidates, that we have to be proactive about going out and getting them. We have a database built for that, and we also love to call people for the first time and have people go, how'd you get my number? I mean, that's fun. We enjoy someone who goes, who are you guys with or whatever, and you say, give me 5 minutes. If you don't talk to me for 5 minutes, and then you never hear the concern again. But I enjoy that kind of the chase, if you will. Generally, we're not getting candidates that way in terms of reactive. We have filled a job with a candidate that came through Twitter, okay, which I still remember. I was gobsmacked. I was like, unbelievable. This guy's fantastic. And I knew who he was. I don't think I would have called him because I didn't know that he was from Boston and we were doing a search in Boston. And he said, it's time for me to go. And he was in the NFL and it was a job for the Celtics. And he was the right guy. And I was, thank heavens he tweeted at me, it was great. And we've gotten business through Twitter as well. We've had a client who said, we like kind of how you guys are using social media. We might have a search, do you want to talk? Sure, let's talk. And it was a national governing board for a sport. And he turned into a great client. We did 3 or 4 searches for them. Oh. So that's why I think social, we could do better at it because I'm not the best guy at it. And that's kind of what we have.
Well, you mentioning that about Twitter, It gives me license to obsess about Twitter for a good couple more months, so thanks for that. So you're pitching in a shootout situation. Who are you shooting out against? What's the value proposition? What are you going to hammer on in this pitch so that your potential client walks away thinking that Marquee's the one?
If they don't want a boutique firm, we're in trouble. I mean, we are who we are. Right. And so meaning if they want to do a international search and look at like CPG, consumer packaged goods, and go tap someone, from Palmolive or Johnson & Johnson or whatever to come in, which on occasion is in vogue in our industry every once in a while. They say, hey, we want to look at outside the industry, and then we want to look at inside the industry. If they want to do that, they're probably going to hire, a large, top 10 search firm that's international. Okay. If they want to hire a boutique, I'll raise our hand and say we feel like we're the best in the business. We've got great references, great testimonials. Our pitch is partly about the process, but it's not, hey, we have 23 steps. It's like, who cares? Pound sand, it's 23 steps. It's who's running it. It's the two of us. It's that, I'll use an example. We had a candidate that contacted us and said, hey, I got a call from another agency, and they couldn't answer any questions. And they sent him a job description, and he sent it to us, and it said floater on the bottom of it. And this is one of the biggest.
The employee that sent the job description.
His title was floater. And he couldn't answer one question about the job. And you thought, oh my gosh, this is a vice president search for a major organization, and it's being run by one of the biggest search firms in our space.
Right.
And they're giving license to this person to call on their behalf. And I think that's embarrassing for our business. Yeah. And if they aren't embarrassed, I am for them. Right. So for us, I talk about the fact that you'll never deal with the junior varsity. Right. The junior varsity for us is we're only going to have people talk about your brand with the right candidates, and we'll present you in the best positive light. We're not going to leave people hanging so they're going, wow, that organization that represented, that sports team is a bunch of hacks. We're not that way. And so we'll certainly pitch that all day long. We'll pitch the diversity rate that we have in our diversity inclusion is huge. We'll pitch the diversity inclusion rate that we have in our placements. We will talk about, it's hard in a business that there's a lot of name dropping, but it's usually a league or sport that we've worked in. And we can talk about, these are organizations that we want you can call them about us. We're happy for you to do that. They're happy to serve as a reference for us. We were up against Korn Ferry in a shootout here recently, and we won it, which I felt pretty good about considering how big they are. Right. The company, it was a vice president search, the company wanted to use the boutique side, and they loved our service model, our approach. They knew that the person selling it at that company wasn't going to be doing all of the work and the legwork. Right. They might parachute at the end and make the offer or come in. Right. But they didn't want that model. They wanted the boutique model. So if that's what they want, I think of it as big company experience, Robert Half, wherever, big company experience, small company service. Right. There's an expectation at a small company that your service is going to be stellar, that if you call me on a weekend or if you call me and you text me or you want to talk about it, I'm going to pick up the phone. You're my client. You're paying my bills. I'm going to take that phone call. Right. And you're going to know that I'm on your side too. If you've hired us, you're more on the payroll. And so I treat ourselves as we're an extension of those organizations. So that kind of pitch that's organic, I think, tends to resonate with the companies that should be working with us.
Well, so that makes me think, Korn Ferry, those folks don't open up a sports practice because a guy from the CEO practice moves over. They must acquire to open up their sports practices. I'm thinking about like events companies. You must be on the radar of companies. Don't tell me anything that's sort of not ready for vocalization, but aren't you on the radar of talent agents and events companies that think that they want to get a foothold into the sports industry and get access to a network of people that are all making these huge buying decisions?
Yes, I mean, you saw there's a list that was in our office on the wall that has the sports-related search firms that we're on, and I think people pay attention to that are usually the calls that we've gotten over the years have been from companies that were in another country. They were a European-based company, and they wanted to have a foothold in the United States. So they looked at, hey, privately held, we've kind of an acqui-hire, acquisition, and take on the people there.
Right.
I got a call actually in the last week from actually one of the top 10 companies that had an idea for us about the same model. I'm in sales. I'm like, why wouldn't I take these calls, right? I want to find out what's going on in the industry. I've never gotten a call from Korn Ferry. I mean, they do have a sports practice that a guy that's been running it forever. But the companies that are next wave kinds of companies that are coming to the U.S., they have done that. They've acquired some of my competitors. They've called us. I've decided to go this is the right route. I don't know that forever that will be the right route. You'd have to be really selective in a culture like this to find the right culture that's going to be a good fit. Especially, what am I going to do? Retire? I mean, I'm going to continue to do what I do, which I love this work. So you'd want to do it with the right, like-minded people that I want to learn too. I go to lunch and meet with you and Jeff and other people to learn and to hear what else is going on out there. So we probably got a half dozen of those calls in 7 years. But I think that the bigger companies, to your point, some of the larger ones do have a sports practice. Most of the time they've made it by way of placing coaches or athletic directors, and they've done some really significant searches that are really high profile and they get written about, and that is used as kind of public relations cover for some of those people doing the hiring.
Right.
That we've got a search firm involved and that they failed. Point at those guys. So that does happen in our business because of that nature to some degree of passing the buck and covering your butt. But it's a competitive industry. It's a very competitive industry that's gotten more so the last 5 years than certainly less so.
How about big growth areas? How about esports?
Man, esports, I should invite Tyler to come up here and talk about esports because he's more of the right genre. I grew up playing Donkey Kong and whatever, Miss Pac-Man or something. So I'm great in an arcade. But when you come to esports, and esports is certainly gaming as well, and I think that gaming is more popular than esports, although they kind of use the same terminology.
Right.
It's $1 billion plus industry. It's still the Wild West, in my opinion. It's still, people are trying to figure out, the ecosystem is different from what we do in professional sports because of you have the licensed games, you have the media companies. Sponsors really drive it. I think that's 50+% of the revenue is sponsorship. But that audience too, if you're in the esports audience, I don't know, I might be wrong on this, but I do believe that authenticity is really important. And if you have brands that are trying to co-opt, which you do in sports to some degree, but if you're doing that to try and get into esports and gaming, that the 20-something-year-olds, they're going to look at that and go, who are these people that are trying to use the vehicle of esports as they're corrupting our game. So there is a little bit of care they have to have of the genuineness of having the right sponsors. But it's a different in terms of where the revenue is coming from. I think there's still people trying to figure that out. Private equity firms have gotten involved. The capitalization, I don't know. I don't know that it's real yet. So there's real money in it. I'm not sure exactly where it is. We've done a couple of things in that space.
Right.
It was very speculative. The company that was working with us it was a speculative move for them to hire, but it was like a GM they were doing almost like a Comic-Con, but a conference around an esports, a game title that was really popular that I learned a lot more about once we did the search.
Sure.
Tyler taught me a lot about it, but it was really interesting. But a year into that project, it was a successful search. They decided that they weren't going to do the conference again.
Yeah.
Where they were traveling roadshow. So I think that it's a speculative business that there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Speaking of conferences, and this will be my last question, then we'll open up to the audience. Coronavirus, how will that affect your business? It sounds to me like you do more conferences and networking in that way than even the average. Certainly you're national, so tell me a little bit about how coronavirus do you think will affect your business?
Well, we're in a healthcare company here, right? You guys do healthcare search. So I was hoping that maybe I'd learn from the group here. We're literally learning about it real time every day.
Yeah.
We just did a search for the San Jose earthquakes, and they're great friends. And the first county in the country that made it illegal to have events of over, I think, 1,100 people is Santa Clara County or whatever county that they're in. So the Sharks and the Earthquakes have to do something about their home games. They will not have an audience, so they will either have people, they'll play in front of no one, or they will postpone it. They could move it. There's a lot of things. I spoke with them yesterday, and they're trying to figure those things out. So I think that there's a lot of nobody wants to be first in terms of the stuff that's happening, canceling South by Southwest and the prevailing news that are coming out of that. Right. I think everybody in the industry is looking to say, how are my peers dealing with this? What's the right way to do it? We have to be on the front foot. It's a reactive situation, but they want to be on the front foot. And so they're being very strategic about it. But you're literally upstairs before this hearing about baseball games being canceled in March and other events. So I'm supposed to go to a conference in 2 weeks that is a big industry conference that will have the industry-wide 40 under 40 hosted at it. Right. And I got an email today. My wife is convinced it's going to be canceled because she knows a lot about these events. She's like, it's going to get canceled. We got an email from them today saying that Roger Goodell is set to speak. So they're doubling down as everyone else is not. We'll talk in 2 weeks, and we'll know more. But for the live events business, it's scary because of the revenue that's tied into these events, because of how easy it is to say, well, an usher has, at our event had coronaviruses, and now everyone in this 20,000 person building has been exposed. The liability, is concerning everyone. Right. So the modicum of caution, but then you've got other people on the other side saying, let's continue to live our lives, which I think is not the right way to look at it. But still, I don't know the right answer. It's happening around us, and it's affecting our business pretty substantially. Right. It's not just the conferences that you go to, but it's the revenue of your client base. The lifeblood of our industry. Yeah. Well, that's great. So let's go to questions. How do you utilize existing interested candidates to market to clients? How do I utilize existing interested candidates to market to clients? So kind of the most placeable candidate type of a mentality. We don't prescribe, we don't follow that religiously. I think what we do, if we're out there, if we're talking to an organization that is, we have a need, we're not sure if we're going to do a search, or we're thinking something's coming up, we'll probably, text is phenomenal. And I've got a keyboard that, Bluetooths into my phone because fat fingers is not good. So I can sit there and type a message to a prospective client and say, I just got off the phone with someone who I'm really excited about. I think they could be a good fit for these reasons. Just so you know. So, it's a tease. Essentially, it's a tease to try and land that search. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, we're not doing it multiple times a day. It's probably, we know there's something that's on our lead list and we want to land that, we want to work on it. So we're probably saying, besides, let us do the search, just so you know, we're thinking about you. I like to just tell people, I'm thinking about you. Right. I'm thinking about you, and I had this conversation, and boy, I have to admit, I got excited. And I just try to take a very kind of, aw shucks kind of an approach where it's a sales pitch, but it just feels real, and that's just our style. Sure. And it tends to work for us. But we're not interviewing a candidate and then calling, 10 companies to try and market them. Right. Even though that's not the worst idea in the world, I don't think that we're doing that. As a retained firm, you're selling your network and you're selling your process, and but at the end of the day, we're making the match, and so eventually it's one person that takes that job. So I understand. And I mean, that point is you might get a candidate that's interested that gets referred. Hey, we're working on a job, and we fill a lot of jobs through referrals. We love sending out thank you gifts to people because they referred a candidate that we placed. That happens a lot. Okay, what role is, if any, is Marquee playing in the future of sports in Portland? We hope that we'll play a substantial role if a baseball team comes. Okay. We played golf with the head of that last year. To have conversations because we want to be consultative. Our approach is to be consultative. Don't just hire us when you need us. Talk about strategy as it relates to recruiting. We want to be on your kitchen cabinet, if you will, and on your board of talking about those things. So we'd love to be involved in that. I'm pretty good friends with the CEO of Sport Oregon, and he's a phenomenal guy that is responsible for bringing events here like the World Championships of track and field, anything that's, if figure skating did a World Championship or something, he's recruiting events here to drive Convention and Visitor Bureau business, to drive hotel rooms, to drive economic impact. And he's the right guy for that job. He came out of the agency world and he knows the market really well. So I have lunch with him quite often and we talk about ideas. We introduced him to one of the people he just hired. So we would love to find a way to help lift sports and professional sports in Portland.
Yeah.
We think really highly of the Hillsborough Hops. They're a professional, minor league team that does a really good job in Hillsborough. But we think that this market punches above its weight.
Mm-hmm.
It's still 20-something DMA, but
DMA.
the marketing territory essentially. So if you're thinking about the territories for purposes of broadcasts, how many people live in those markets? So we're in the move around 22, 23, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, we're the largest city with only one major league franchise.
Mm-hmm.
We have two. Soccer is definitely major league, even though some people say Big Four. It's really Big Five.
Mm-hmm.
MLS is part of the Big Five. But there's a bunch of markets smaller than us that have 3 and more. Our problem in Portland is we only have 2 publicly traded companies that are headquartered here.
Right.
And one doesn't do anything as it relates to sports. Last I checked, PCC, Precision Cast Parts, does nothing. And Intel's our largest employer, and they're not even based here, right? So, when you think about the numbers, big business drives revenue for premium seats, for suites, for sponsorship, and we've got a lot of companies like mine. We've got a lot of small, medium-sized companies in this market. Yep. Are they going to buy enough seats, enough premium, enough of the higher-priced seats for baseball? Has a better chance than ever before, but it's still a long shot.
It's a long shot.
Anything under 50% a long shot.
Huh.
It's it's not because they don't have good people involved. It's because of the economic climate in Portland and the challenges of building a facility here. Mm-hmm. You think about trying to build a facility and the maelstrom of getting through, the people that don't want a facility built. It would have been a great idea to tear Memorial Coliseum down, build a new, better memorial, for veterans, tear Memorial Coliseum down and build a AAA baseball stadium. But that didn't go anywhere, and that would have been a great idea right next to the Rose Garden. Right. That would have changed the district completely. They didn't, and we still have Veterans Memorial Coliseum, which is a blight. We should have a better memorial, but we're a progressive city with very regressive kinds of ideas about development and about staying kind of the same minor league town that we are. And so I like the idea of having an additional major league town team. The NHL would be a great fit here, to be honest with you, to think about the National Hockey League.
Why NHL better than baseball?
Well, one, we used to have we have a building that's good for it. Paul Allen never was going to do that, so that just he could have moved the Penguins here at one point. Mario Lemieux saved the Penguins. Maybe I'm a little biased. I'd love going to baseball games. Trust me, outside would be fun. But an NHL game is versus TV. Going to a game is an amazing experience, and I think we have a great fan base with the Winterhawks. I would be sad for the Winterhawks. I'm not sure how they would coexist. But because of the stadium, I thought it was really built for hockey more than basketball. So that stadium could have been that arena could have been a great arena. Now it's too far down the road unless there's probably significant renovations. But NHL would have been a very competitive sport to have here. Lesser games, 40-some games versus the 80-some of baseball. Baseball can still work, but it'll be a heavier lift, I guess.
Right. My opinion. Right, but it'd be a lot of travel. Isn't that one of the issues, that the other teams traveling to Portland and it's sort of a long slog?
Where's Seattle?
Well, Seattle, but does Seattle have an NHL team?
Oh, well, I think you're saying NHL. Yes, they do as of 21 or 22. Oh. So they're renovating Key Arena. I thought you were talking about baseball. But you've got Vancouver, right, that you have, and then you have some of the other provinces in Canada with teams. Then you have San Jose. So Portland, I think, would have been a great fit. Now, that's not going to happen anytime soon. So I think it's baseball. But from a travel perspective, when you have Seattle involved, and think about the rivalries, how much fun it would be to have a rivalry with either the Mariners, who's a plodding, underperforming team forever, or a rivalry with the NHL, Seattle team. It's the MLS rivalry is fantastic. The Sonics, my take is the Sonics will be back in 25-ish or something like that, depending on any recessions. But I think there'll be an NBA team back there with this building that they're doing. But that's the rivalry would be a lot of fun, selfishly.
Okay, we've got several more questions, probably enough for an hour or half hour at least. So let's just limit it to this last one. With a very mobile candidate pool, how are non-competes in your industry?
That's a good point about the mobile candidate pool. Most of our searches are filled by candidates that have to relocate. Mm-hmm. Most of them are, not all of them. The non-competes are few and far between that we have to deal with. I think that the industry as a whole, there are some larger agencies that have used it, that had a non-compete where they wouldn't let them move to a competitor. The non-competes I see are in market where I don't know why you'd sign a non-compete unless you're getting something for it. Where you're like, well, I'm going to get some sort of a contract, or I'll get better compensation or something. Some of the candidates have a non-compete where in the market they can't move to another similar sports team. So on occasion that happens. Very rarely do we run into that, and very rarely does it ever hold us up. At the end of the day, it restrains trade, and the court system doesn't really like, restraint of trade, and certainly in California, nothing's ever going to hold up there. So in most cases, if there's a non-compete, we want to know about it, and we want them to tell us about it. But we have one client right now that's a software as a service in sports that has asked us to make sure that, because it's SaaS, they definitely have more non-competes in that space.
Interesting.
And so we need to actually change our methodology a little bit on that search to ensure up front that we're asking those questions.
That's great. Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. Thank you very much to Jeff Yoakum for sharing your insights. And let's wrap up here. Please come back to our next alert and oriented speaker series. We've got several speakers coming in to talk about EQ and diversity in recruiting, and we have some entrepreneurs of a different stripe altogether in consulting as well that we hope to have in front of you very soon. But for now, thanks again for Jeff Yoakum, and let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.